Experience the kinetic glow of a life in constant motion, where every single choice creates a ripple that changes the world. Our 3D visuals capture the energy and the passion of those who lived every second to the absolute fullest. Subscribe today and feel the incredible power of motion.
My name is Gerald Hutchins. If you're watching this right now, I want you to take a moment before I begin, because what I'm about to share with you is something I never not in 63 years of living, not in 31 years of raising a family, thought I would ever have to say out loud. I'm a retired postal worker from Knoxville, Tennessee. I spent 34 years delivering mail in all kinds of weather. And in all that time, the one thing that kept me going was knowing I was coming home to people I loved. My wife Dorothy passed 8 years ago from a heart condition we didn't catch in time. After that, it was just me, my son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandson, Cooper. Cooper was the light that came on in my chest every single morning. 7 years old, gap-toothed smile, obsessed with dinosaurs and anything that had wheels on it. That boy was my whole reason for still being here. My son Marcus worked long-haul trucking routes. Gone Monday, back Friday, sometimes gone 2 weeks straight depending on the load. I lived about 4 miles from their house, and after Dorothy passed, Marcus asked me to come around more, help with Cooper, keep my daughter-in-law company. I was happy to do it. More than happy. Being needed again after years of grief that felt like medicine. My daughter-in-law's name was Renata. I want you to hold that name in your mind as I tell you this story, because by the end of it, you're going to understand why I chose the word was. Renata was 34 when all of this happened. She was smart, organized, kept the house spotless, always had dinner on the table when Marcus pulled in the driveway on Friday evenings. On the surface, she appeared to be a devoted mother. She volunteered at Cooper's school once a month. She posted pictures of them baking cookies together on the weekends. I'm telling you, if you had looked at that family from the outside, you would have said, now that's a good home. But something shifted in Cooper around the time he turned 7. I first noticed it on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. I'd come over to pick him up from the school bus stop like I did every Tuesday and Thursday, while Renata ran errands. Cooper stepped off that bus, and instead of running toward me the way he always did, arms out, sneakers slapping the sidewalk, he walked. Slowly, head down. His backpack looked like it weighed 100 pounds. I crouched down to his level and said, "Hey, buddy, how was school today?" He looked up at me and gave me this smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Fine, Grandpa," he said. It was fine. That word, fine. A 7-year-old boy should not say fine the way a tired adult does. That's not a child's word. That's a word people use when they've learned not to complain. I let it go that first day. Kids have hard days. I know that. But over the following 3 or 4 weeks, I kept seeing the same thing. Cooper, my Cooper, who used to narrate entire dinosaur documentaries from memory, who once talked for 45 minutes straight about the difference between a Triceratops and a Styracosaurus, had gone quiet. Not shy quiet. Careful quiet. Like he was measuring every word before he let it out. He also started flinching. Not at loud noises. Not at strangers. At small things. The refrigerator door closing too hard. A cabinet. The sound of footsteps in the hallway when he didn't know who was coming. I watched him freeze once when Renata called his name from the kitchen. And the way his little shoulders came up toward his ears, I felt something cold move through me. I told myself I was projecting. I told myself I was an old man who'd lost his wife and was maybe looking for problems where there weren't any. I told myself Renata was a good mother. But I kept watching. One Thursday in October, I gave Cooper his bath, while Renata was on the phone with her sister. I noticed a bruise on his left calf. Oblong. Yellowish green, which meant it was several days old. I asked him about it casually. The way you do with kids. And he said he fell off the monkey bars at recess. I made a mental note. 1 bruise. 1 explanation. Kids fall. That's not evidence of anything. 2 weeks later, I saw another one. Same leg. Different spot. Higher up. Closer to the back of the knee. This one was fresher. Darker. This time I asked him again. He said he bumped into the corner of his desk at school. He said it very quickly, and he did not look at me when he said it. I am 63 years old. I have been around long enough to know the difference between a child who is telling you what happened and a child who is telling you what he's been told to say. I did not sleep well that night. The following week, Marcus came home on Friday, and I pulled him aside after dinner while Renata was putting Cooper to bed. I told him what I'd noticed. The flinching, the quiet, the bruises. I tried to be calm. I tried to be fair. I said, "Son, I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just telling you what I've seen." Marcus listened. He nodded. But then he said something that broke my heart just a little. He said, "Dad, you know how Renata is. She's firm with him, old-fashioned about discipline. Maybe she's just, strict." I looked at my son and I said, "Marcus, there's a difference between strict and scared." He didn't have an answer for that. But he also didn't take action. He went back inside, and I drove home. And I sat in my driveway for a long time before I could make myself go in. I want you to understand that what I did next was not something I took lightly. I am not a man who acts on suspicion alone. I needed to know. I needed to be certain. Because if I was wrong, I was about to damage a family. And if I was right, then every day I waited was a day that little boy was not protected. I bought a small Wi-Fi camera, the kind people use to check on their pets. It was barely bigger than a deck of cards. I told Renata I wanted to set up a little monitor in Cooper's room because I'd been worried about him sleeping, and that I sometimes checked on him from my phone at night when I was anxious. She didn't question it. Why would she? I was just a doting old grandfather. I positioned it on his bookshelf, angled toward the door and the side of his bed. I went home that night, and I told God that I hoped with everything in me that I would see nothing, that I would watch that feed for a week and feel like a foolish old man, and then I would take the camera down and find another way to help my grandson. That is not what happened. The first 2 nights were quiet. Cooper slept. The hallway light stayed off. I checked the feed from my phone at midnight both nights, and felt myself start to relax just a little. On the 3rd night, at 11:47, the door to Cooper's room opened. Renata came in. She was wearing a dark robe, and she moved quietly, deliberately. Cooper was asleep. She stood over his bed for a moment. Then she reached down and grabbed his upper arm and pulled him into a sitting position. I watched Cooper jolt awake, confused and disoriented, and before he could make a sound, she leaned in close to his face and said something I couldn't hear. Whatever it was made him go completely still. Then she pulled him out of bed by that same arm and walked him to the corner of the room, where she made him kneel on the hardwood floor. She stood over him for what I can only describe as a very long time. He was kneeling on that hard floor in the dark, in his pajamas, his small back rigid, not moving. Then she walked out of the room. She left him there. He stayed in that corner for 40 minutes. I watched the time stamp. 40 minutes on his knees, on a hardwood floor at midnight. At one point he shifted his weight and I could see him wince. At no point did he call out for anyone. He had learned not to. When Renata came back in, she said something else to him, and he climbed back into bed and she left. Cooper lay on his back in the dark with his eyes open for a long time after that. He did not go back to sleep for over an hour. I sat in my armchair and I could not move. My hands were shaking. My chest felt like something had been tightened around it. I had just watched my 7-year-old grandson, asleep in his own bed in his own home, be woken up and punished in the dark for God knows what reason, and the woman who did it was the person who was supposed to be his safe place. I called Marcus at 6 the next morning. He answered half asleep. I said, "Son, I need you to come home. Not Friday. Today." He must have heard something in my voice, because he didn't argue. He said, "Dad, what happened?" I said, "Just come home. I'll show you when you get here." Marcus walked into my living room at 3 that afternoon. I sat him down and I played him the footage from my phone. I watched my son watch it. I watched his face change in a way that I cannot fully describe to you, except to say that it was the face of a man watching something that cannot be unseen and cannot be unfelt. When it was over, he sat very still. Then he put his face in his hands. I gave him a moment. Then I said, "How long do you think this has been going on?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "I don't know, Dad. I don't know." I said, "Marcus, we have to move tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight." Now here is the part that still sits heavy with me, even now. Marcus wanted to confront Renata directly. He wanted to believe there was an explanation, that maybe she was sleepwalking, or going through something mental health-wise that she hadn't told him about. He kept saying, "She's his mother. She loves him," as if love and harm cannot exist in the same person. As if a mother's love is always a shield and never sometimes the very thing a child needs protection from. I understood my son's resistance. I had felt it too. But I had also watched that footage, and I had watched my grandson's face, and I knew that explanations could come later. Safety had to come first. I said, "You can ask her why. But Cooper doesn't sleep in that house tonight." Marcus agreed. We went together that afternoon. Marcus told Renata he was home early and that he was taking Cooper to spend the night at my place, that I hadn't been feeling well and had asked for company. It was not entirely a lie. I had not been well since 11:47 the previous night. Renata seemed mildly surprised but didn't object. Cooper, when he saw me standing in the doorway, ran to me so fast and so hard that he nearly knocked me down. He buried his face in my jacket and held on. He didn't say a word. He just held on. I held him back. And I made him a promise in my head, one I intended to keep. Marcus waited until Cooper was settled at my house with his dinosaur books and his cup of warm milk. Then he went back and confronted Renata with the footage. I was not there for that conversation. Marcus told me later that she cried. She said she'd been under enormous stress. She said Cooper had been disrespectful and defiant, and that she was using a method her own mother had used on her. She actually used the phrase tough love. She said she never hit him, as if the only form of harm a body can suffer is impact. Marcus asked her if she understood that what she'd been doing was abuse. She said, "And I want you to sit with this for a moment." She said, "Other parents do much worse." That was when Marcus asked her to leave the house. The next morning, I took Cooper to his pediatrician and asked for a full evaluation. When the doctor examined him and asked how he was sleeping, Cooper looked at the floor and said he sometimes woke up at night. When the doctor asked why, he said, "Because I have to be good." The doctor looked at me over Cooper's head, and I gave the slightest nod. She understood. The pediatrician documented everything. We filed a report with Child Protective Services that same day. Marcus retained a family attorney by the end of the week. The CPS investigation found the pattern of what is legally termed psychological maltreatment and physical discipline that exceeded reasonable limits. Renata was required to attend a parenting intervention program. The divorce proceedings began shortly after. Now, I know some of you watching this are going to have questions. The biggest one I've been asked is why I didn't act the very first night I saw that footage, instead of calling Marcus in the morning. That is a fair question, and I want to answer it honestly. When I watched that recording at midnight, I was in shock. Real shock. The kind that makes your hands cold and your thinking slow. I sat in that chair, and my mind kept trying to reject what my eyes had just shown me. It took me hours to accept it fully. And when morning came and I could think straight again, I did exactly what I should have done. I called my son. We acted the same day. If you are ever in a similar situation, please do not wait for morning. Please do not wait for more evidence. One time is enough. What you saw the first time is real. Cooper has been living with Marcus full-time for 7 months now. He attends weekly therapy with a counselor who specializes in children. In the first few weeks, he barely spoke in their sessions. His therapist told Marcus that was completely normal, that children who have been conditioned to stay quiet in the presence of adults don't automatically trust that speaking is safe. It takes time. It takes consistency. It takes a grown-up who shows up the same way. Every single time, no matter what. Marcus changed his route schedule. He took a regional position, shorter hauls, home every night. He took a pay cut to do it. He has never once complained about that. About 2 months ago, Cooper came into my kitchen while I was making breakfast and climbed up onto the counter stool and said, "Grandpa, did you know the Stegosaurus had a brain about the size of a walnut?" I turned around and looked at him, and he was grinning that gap-toothed grin, his whole face alive with the pleasure of knowing something interesting. I said, "I did not know that. Cooper, tell me everything." And he did. For 45 minutes, that boy talked about every dinosaur he could name, in order of his personal preference, with reasons. I did not interrupt once. I made us both scrambled eggs, and I listened to every single word. There's something I want to say directly to any grandparent watching this, because I think sometimes we are told that our role is to stay out of it, to let the parents handle things, to not overstep. I am here to tell you that when a child's safety is at stake, staying out of it is not a virtue. It is a failure. Your years of experience, your ability to read a room, your willingness to act even when it's uncomfortable, those are not things to apologize for. Those are the exact things that child might need more than anyone else in the world can give them. And to every parent who has a suspicion, a feeling in your stomach that something is wrong, please, do not wait until you have a bruise, a recording, a signed confession. Trust what you see in your child's eyes. Trust the flinch. Trust the silence that shouldn't be there. Cooper starts 2nd grade next month. He has a best friend named Jonah who lives 2 streets down. He told me last week that he wants to be a paleontologist when he grows up, and also maybe a truck driver like his dad. But only if the dinosaurs don't come back. I told him I thought that was a very reasonable career plan. I am 63 years old. I have buried a wife. I have driven 4 miles in the cold and the dark more times than I can count to be in that house, in that kitchen, in that driveway, wherever my family needed me to be. I do not regret a single mile. But the miles I am most grateful for are the ones I drove the night I brought Cooper home, the ones I drove to the pediatrician the next morning, the ones I will keep driving, for as long as I am able, to make sure that boy knows that somewhere in this world there is a person who will always come. If you are watching this, and you know a child who seems different lately, quieter, more careful, more afraid, please say something. To someone, to anyone. You do not have to be certain. You do not have to have proof. You just have to be willing to ask the question and to keep asking until someone listens. Be the person who shows up. Be the voice that speaks when the child cannot. That is the only thing I know for certain, after 63 years of living, that is always, always worth doing.